As I said, I'm going to talk about how all these things flow from the very nature of the system and why it cannot be reformed. It must be done in and done away with. We need a revolution, the most radical revolution in the history of humanity. If you want to eliminate a problem or an evil, you must get to the root of it. If you want to eliminate the oppression and miserable conditions of the masses of people in the world today, you have to dig down to the underlying foundation, the ground in which this oppression and misery is rooted, and which continually gives rise to this oppression and suffering. You cannot get rid of a poisonous plant and create something healthy in its place just by pulling up the top of the plant. You have to pull it up from the roots and then grow something completely different and change the soil too. That is what a radical solution is. Radical means having to do with the root. And this is why a real revolution is needed, and this is what it's all about. Now, fundamental things about the world are hidden from us. Fundamental refers to the foundation, like the foundation of a house or another building, the thing that everything rests on. So what is the fundamental thing about how the world works that is hidden from us? The fundamental thing that goes on in the world every day that enables human beings to live and have a society is the exchange of labor among people. Now, like I said, this is not at all obvious. If there were only 6 people in the entire world, or we had 6 people just by themselves living together, this would be more obvious, because then the 6 of them would get together and they'd say, okay, what are you going to do? Maybe you're going to go out and hunt for food. Maybe you're going to go out and find materials to build a house. Maybe you two are going to work on constructing the house. And you would see how everybody's labor, in one form or another, contributed to people being able to survive and interact with each other in a society. But we don't have 6 people in the world. We have 6 billion. And they live not just in one little place, but all over the globe. But still, the same fundamental thing is going on. If you go to work, you put in a certain amount of work. You get back a certain amount of money in exchange for that work. You go buy certain products at the store or whatever, and then you take them to your house and use them, and you exchange things in that kind of a way. This goes on in such an everyday way that we don't even stop and think about it. But you are actually exchanging things indirectly through all these different stages with people all over the various parts of the globe. Think about it this way. Don't do it right now. But when you go home, check out your clothes. Look at the labels on them. Don't just look at where it says what company brand is on the clothes. But look where it says where these clothes or other things you have were made. In Nicaragua, in Honduras, in Haiti, in Pakistan, in Egypt, all over the world. We are exchanging things, and ultimately and fundamentally we're exchanging labor. People in those countries are putting in a certain amount of labor. And we're putting in a certain amount, and that's being exchanged through the form of the way in which we buy things with money. But it's not very obvious because partly they want to keep it hidden from us. And the other reason is there are things that get in the way of our seeing that very clearly. First is the fact that there are all these intermediate steps. We're not the 6 people directly exchanging labor with each other. We're exchanging money, getting something. The remote character of where it came from is not obvious unless you do go read those labels, for example. So that's kind of one thing that keeps it hidden from us, is that here's somebody working in a sweatshop in Pakistan making the shirt that you wear, and you're over here putting in a certain amount of work so that you get the money to be able to go to buy that shirt when it gets to a store that you go to. You're exchanging the labor you put in for the labor they put in to make that shirt, but it goes through so many stages in between that you don't see that. But the other thing that gets in the way, and today the more significant thing, that is at each of these steps, someone steps in and says, wait a minute, that's mine, I own it, I'm going to sell it. Not you who made it, me who made you make it. That someone is the capitalist. That's the system we live under. We don't work and exchange our labor directly, or we don't even exchange the products of what we produce with our labor directly. Some capitalist takes it at each stage, says this is mine, and sells it to someone else. And down the line it goes, each time going through another capitalist. But this is what's underlying all that. As I said, go look again at your clothes. Think of the small children who were working 12 and 14 hours a day, making those clothes for pennies an hour if they get that. See if you can see the tears of the children and their blood and bones that go into making those things. See if you can hear the muffled cry and the moans of those children as they're forced to work under these conditions in order to try to live. So what is this wonderful system under which all this takes place? What is capital, and what is capitalism as a system? Capital is a relation of domination, of exploitation, and capitalism is a system based on exploitation. Sometimes people think of capital as money. You heard him talk on the financial channel. Oh, he has so much capital, meaning so much money to invest. And money is one form that capital takes. But that is not the heart and not the essence of it. In a deeper sense, money is only the outward expression of capital. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I've talked a little bit about the exchange of labor between people, the muffled cries and moans of the children who make all, not just the clothes, but many of the other things we use. Or let's ask another question. This stock market with this clanging bell we hear about all the time. What are they trading on the stock market? Where does the wealth come from that they're trading in when they buy shares and stocks in different companies and bonds? They're trading in human flesh. They're trading in human suffering. They're trading in what's drained out of those children and out of other people, with their bones literally broken and their skin literally going into the things that are produced. That's where that wealth is created before the capitalist takes it and says it's mine. That's what they're trading in on the stock market. They're trading in exploitation and degradation of people all over the world, including tens of millions or hundreds of millions of children. Another way to get at this money is the outward expression. Look at your money. Who's on it? Mostly dead presidents and slave owners. But are they the ones that created the wealth either back in slavery days or today? Of course not. So what should be on the money to really express the actual relation of things? Who should really be on the money? The little children, the slaves, and others who have been enslaved and exploited and degraded in this way. That should be on the money to tell us where the wealth really came from. And along with that, when we get to it, we'll put people who have led slave rebellions and uprisings and revolutions against this system on the money, as long as we have to use money. Capital is not machinery either. Sometimes you hear people say they got so much capital, got so many machines in the factory or the workshop or whatever. Machinery, after all, is made by people, through the labor of people, like everything else, like those clothes. Somebody made those machines. They didn't appear magically out of somewhere. So once again, when you look at a machine, any kind of machine, including a car or a computer or a CD player or anything, think of the fact that this machine is just the product, the physical embodiment of the labor of the people who made it. Once again, use your imagination and look for all the people in many parts of the world with their skin and their blood, their bones and their suffering that have gone into making all those machines. At the same time, machines are not necessarily capital. Machines are just machines. Whether they are capital or not depends on whether or not they are made under the capitalist system. Under another system, the system of communism, machinery would be made in radically different conditions, for radically different ends, and would belong to the people, not some capitalists who step in to expropriate them, to take them as their own at each stage of the process. Capital is a relationship in which one person or a group or class of people owns and controls the means to live and the means to create wealth, and thereby forces others to work for them in exchange for a wage. Capital is the control over this labor of others, and it is this, making others work for you, that creates the wealth that the capitalists get. Capitalism is a system in which everything that is produced and exchanged among people is a commodity, and this includes people's labor power, that is, their ability to work, That too is a commodity. It is bought and sold under the system, the capitalist system. And when your labor power is bought and you are put to work, the capitalist who buys your labor power controls you and what you do while you were working for him. They'll even have his slave drivers in a modern form tell you how long you can go to the bathroom or whether you can go to the bathroom. And really, the capitalist class as a whole controls your very life, has the power of life and death over you because they determine whether or not you can even have a job. And they control you if they give you a job, quote unquote. Capitalism then is a form of modern day slavery. It is wage slavery. That's why I know, at least when I was coming up, people used to regularly refer to a job as a slave. Yeah, I got me a slave. I got to go off and work. But you weren't literally owned. You just produced the wealth, and then you could be fired. But let's back up a second and dig down further into the foundation of this. What is a commodity? You hear that word a lot. What is a commodity? Well, let's take an ugly example to start out with. If a woman makes love with a man because she feels like it and because they care about each other, that can be a beautiful thing. That can be an act, an expression of love, an intimacy between two people who care about each other. But let's take a situation that happens all too often. You're in a housing project or somewhere and you've got to get to work. Or your kids are sick and you got to get them to the hospital and you go running out to get your car to drive your kids to the hospital to get to work and your car doesn't work. And you know some guy down the street who knows how to work on cars and you go to him and you say, would you please help me get my car going? And he's not thinking the way he should be and he says, all right, I'll help you, but you got to give me a little something, something. Now you know this happens. And this is turning what should be a beautiful thing, an act of intimacy between people, into an ugly thing, into a form of a commodity, into which two things are being exchanged for each other. He's helping you with your car, but you got to give him some sex that you may not at all want to give him. Let's take a more commonplace example of commodities. Let's say you grow tomatoes in your backyard. And you eat them yourself, you put them in salad, you give them to your kids, you invite your friends over, and you all eat them. Well, that's not a commodity. Why not? Because the person who's making them, you, is just using them directly. You're not exchanging them with anybody for anything else. If you invite your friends over, if you're a good friend, you don't say, give me some money for these tomatoes, you just give them some tomatoes. So a commodity then is not something that's produced to be used directly by the people who produce it. It's something that's produced to be exchanged either directly or through money, is the more common way these days, for another something, another commodity. And one of the things about this is, because it's not made to be directly used but to be exchanged, is you get the separation of usability of this thing from its sellability. And sellability rules over usability. Now, what am I talking about? Let's say you're really good at making chocolate chip cookies. You make chocolate chip cookies, everybody loves them. Your kids love them, all your friends love them. You make them and eat them all the time, maybe more than you should. But then one day, one of your friends trying to do you a favor says, man, these chocolate chip cookies are really good. You ought to sell these. You could make a lot of money. You could be famous like Famous Amos. So you go along with it. You say, well, yeah, let me try it. So you make some chocolate chip cookies and you put up a stand. And sure enough, people come over and buy from them. And they love your chocolate chip cookies. But then you're out. So what are you going to do? If you're going to keep going with this, you got to go back and buy some more flour. And you got to go back and buy some more butter and some more eggs and some more walnuts and some more chocolate chips, some more sugar. And then you start making more chocolate chip cookies. But then you run into something. When you're trying to sell these, you run into all these big companies. They already got a Famous Amos out there, and they got other people making these on a massive scale in factories and everything. So you can't make enough to compete with that and to sell them cheaply enough. So then you start saying, well, maybe I better hire somebody to help me make these cookies. Or you get an idea, maybe I'll get my kids to help me. So you get your kids, you start making it, but you're still up against these big companies out there making these cookies. And after a little while, your kids say, we're tired of this, can we have something to eat? And you say, kids, sellability, not usability, sellability. And they look at you and they say, huh? And you say, you're eating up the product. Well, see, this is what it means to get caught up in commodity production and exchange, and you can see what it starts leading to. You either get bigger or you get eaten up. You better go back to just enjoying your own chocolate chip cookies. Producing and exchanging things as commodities leads to anarchy in production and exchange. By anarchy here, I mean a lot of uncertainty, disorder, and chaos, where it is very difficult to know in advance or to predict or to calculate accurately what is going to happen. For example, how much of your product you're going to be able to sell in competition with other people out there. Now, the only way to get your money back is by selling your commodities in this uncertain situation. A situation where many different people are bringing commodities into the market. A situation that is always changing and always open to big changes. A situation in which even big-time operators can get taken down and swallowed up by even bigger and more powerful and more ruthless ones. Again, capitalism makes commodity production and exchange the general way in which things are produced and exchanged in society. It spreads the production and exchange of things as commodities throughout society and throughout the world. And as I said, very importantly, it turns labor power, that is the ability to work itself, also into a commodity. And this is very important because once the capitalist money, the owners of these big companies and so on, once their money is invested as capital for production, that is, once they've bought machinery, raw materials, let's say cotton to be turned into cotton clothes, and so on, and once they've bought people's labor to work and pay them a wage for that, once they've done all that, once they've invested in that way, they have lost that money. It's gone. It's now disappeared into and become embodied in the machinery, the raw materials, and the wages. So they're in a desperate situation themselves. The only way the capitalists can get back that money, plus end up with more capital in the form of more money or profit, the only way he can do that is to exploit the people working for him, force them to produce more wealth than all the money the capitalists invested in the first place. And then the capitalist must sell these products in order to realize his profit. And once again, because of the anarchy of capitalist commodity production and exchange, every capitalist is in this situation, no matter how big they are. They're competing with all the other capitalists doing the same thing all over the country and even all over the world, facing the same compulsion, the same supreme commandment: expand or die, beat out your competitors, accumulate, that is, gather and increase more wealth than you started out with, or go under. Now, monopoly, I'm going to have something to say about monopoly in a minute. This is a situation where one or a few gigantic companies or corporations controls whole industries and whole parts of the economy in large parts of the world. But this monopoly, when it develops, does not change this whole situation. It does not eliminate this drive and this competition. What it does is raise it to a whole other level and spreads it even more fully and forcefully throughout society and throughout the world. And I'm going to come back to this point in a little while. So you can get a sense that this is a vicious cycle that everybody is trapped in so long as we live in a society and a world dominated by capitalism. Even the capitalists themselves are bound by these laws of commodity production and capitalist accumulation. But where they succeed, they gain and benefit from this, while the people they exploit and society as a whole suffers in 1,000 ways from it. For example, under capitalism, many things that millions of people need, such as decent housing, do not get produced, or do not get produced at prices that can be afforded by those who really need them. All for one reason. What counts to the capitalists is not human need, but what they call demand, measured in money terms. That is, how much money can be gained from producing and selling something. Every capitalist enterprise is in the business of making profit, and they will shift from making one kind of product to another, from making in one part of the country or one part of the world to another, in the restless, endless search for the most profit. They are not in the business of making this or that thing that is useful. They are not in the business of doing that. They are in the business of exploiting those they employ and beating out other capitalists in this process. And to them, the people they hire and fire, the people they never hire in the first place, the people who buy their products and the people who are too poor to buy them. To the capitalist, everyone counts and can only count as a business calculation, if they count you at all. Now, sometimes you see these fools get up, like these ranchers and all this kind of shit. And, imagine W down there in his ranch, and they say things like, I'm a self-made man. Nobody gave me anything. I did it all myself. I'm a self-made man. Yeah, you're a self-made man. All the clothes you're wearing, everything you're using is made by other people. The food you eat was picked by other people. The machinery you're driving around, the rifle you own was made by other people. Everything you have and use made by other people. And right now you're exploiting Mexican immigrants on your ranch. And you're sitting on land that was stolen from the native peoples in the first place, but you're a self-made man. That's not what happens under capitalism.